Steve, what is that? It sounds different than our regular soundtrack.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like that one band, Cinema, right? That's what the band was called, and they put out this successful album under that name. No? Yes? It, what is that?
I don't remember any of this. It was a good album. It was successful.
I think so. Like I heard of it, so that says something.
Well, thankfully, our fans wrote in with some notes, so we have something to follow. I got my
Yeah.
old school shirt on, coincidentally, and to me, anything over 40 years is old school, which means I'm a relic. But this is an amazing album. I'm real excited about this show. So, folks, chime in. Tell us what you think of 90125. Did you see the tour? Do you have a favorite song? Where are you watching from? And let's let it rip, Steve.
Yeah, so I'm Steven, you're Dan, I'm the son, you're the dad, and
That's
this
right.
is
We
Yes
have not
Shift.
switched.
Right. And celebrating 40 years of 90125. So we'll start with the context of this album. So, as Yes fans know, Yes
Lean to
broke
your
up.
right. Lean to your right a little so people
Um,
can see you. There you go. See, we're both on the other side of the album cover. There
okay. Yeah,
we go. Yeah.
yeah, I
Steve's like,
wasn't.
what the f- is he doing now?
Yeah, I wasn't looking at the
The
thing,
monitor.
but yeah. But yeah, so this uh obviously was Yes's comeback album. You know, they had broke the drama lineup has broken up in 1981. Uh Chris and Alan went to do their own thing, and Steve and
Run with the
Jeff,
Fox
yeah.
came out of
Uh
that.
yeah, so I'll just read through this. So Chris and Alan attempted XYZ, XYZ Zeppelin with Jimmy Page in 81, and then released Run with the Fox for Christmas that year. And
Oh, so Steven disconnected, but that's okay. He'll be back. And Sage is here, our cat. Sage, one of our cats. Oops, I hope the other cat didn't hear that. But as Steve was saying, Yes had, for all intents and purposes, broken up. And they fragmented to different things. But Chris and Alan stayed on board with each other. And what came out of that was Run with the Fox. Really a cool piece. But also, as Steven said, they grouped up with Jimmy Page. I don't know if you look him up. Look up Jimmy Page. He had some experience with a band. They were actually the backup band of John Bonham, actually, and called Led Zeppelin. Yeah, and some interesting stuff came out of that that ended up in Yes Music, which we'll get to another time. Um, and I don't know why Steve's not back on board. I wonder if they lost the internet where he is. But this album, what's interesting is that Trevor Horn produced this, and it's really neat to me, anyways. Let me know what you think. That Trevor Horn was involved with the follow-up album, and you got to call it that, right? It's a follow-up album because it was the next one that Trevor Horn produces. Steven's back. There he is. Um, and that, I think that's a neat thing that Trevor Horn replaced Jon Anderson. Then Jon Anderson left. The whole band had disbanded. You know, after Trevor had left with the other guys, they all left, and they regrouped in a certain way with Trevor as the producer. So, Steve, take it from where you left off. I was kind of vamping till you came back.
okay, you basically summarized the drama era, or
Yeah, and I explained who Jimmy Page was because a lot of people don't really know John Bonham's backup band member names.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So while Chris and Alan were doing their thing, this young up and coming South African musician Trevor Rabin, formerly of the band Rabbit, released his third solo album Wolf in 1981. And that same year, he recorded demos of songs that he would shop around, including Owner of Lonely Heart, Hold On, and another version of that titled Moving In and Changes, among others. And Rabin even tried a.
I'm sorry. I did not remember that Changes was that early.
Oh yeah, it's on the I'll just show it right now. The 90124 CD that Trevor put out back in 2003.
Wow, I
Um,
forgot about that. I don't think I have that.
yeah, I've played it to you a while ago,
I
and I
was gonna say
remember.
we may have listened to that up the coast of California, or from Arizona to San Diego, or Las Vegas to
No,
San
yeah,
Diego,
this was
something.
late 2000s. I think I lent it to you or something, but
Did I
I
give it
remember
back?
one of the things you said about this was that Miracle of Life, the demo on this is better than what they ended up doing with
Oh
it.
yeah, which, folks, from me, that's a huge statement because I love Miracle of Life. I think it's the best song out of that lineup.
Right. And so yeah, Trevor even tried out for Asia singing that early version of Only Time Will Tell that was called Starry Eyed, but he found no chemistry with the band. And
Oh, I
so
forgot about that. Wow.
And so a producer that I worked with, Mutt Lange, introduced Atlantic's Phil Carson to Trevor Rabin, and Carson connected Rabin with Squire and White in about 1982. And Squire reconnected with Tony Kaye around that time, who'd previously been on Bad Fingers' Say No More
That's
album,
right.
released January 1981. And Jay Shellen, current Yes drummer, also worked with Kaye and Badfinger in 1982. We talked a little bit about that when we had Jay on the show last
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember in some interviews, Rabin has said that it, playing with these guys was the most awful jam ever, but it was still a good time. So even
That's
though it
right.
sounded terrible, there was chemistry
The
there.
energy was there and the chemistry was there, but the jam sounded like crap. Like,
Right.
that's kind of weird that the jam would be so crappy when you have chemistry and such great musicians. Like, but their definition of crap could be what most musicians coming up are striving for right now. So we don't have context of that really. I'd love to hear that. How do you not go click and turn on a cassette recorder during that, the first time ever? Like, right? I'm one of those
Yeah, I
idiots that
mean,
used to record everything.
I don't know. I've heard going a little forward to the talk era, I've heard the demo of Endless Dream that someone posted on YouTube a while back, and it's like almost unlistenable. So maybe it's like that type of situation where the sound is like unlistenable, but like everyone's having a good time playing together.
So
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 it could be
wait,
one of those
what's
situations.
unlistenable about it? The playing or the sonic quality?
Um, I don't. So there are no lyrics. It kind of sounds like gibberish, which, if you can believe
And
it, like
meandering and really
yeah,
gibberish with Jon Anderson wasn't on board
yeah.
yet. Never mind.
Well, on talk he was, yeah,
Well, yeah. What am I saying? Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. Like you have to listen to it to get what I mean. But
Okay.
anyway, so this band now called Cinema also brought in Trevor Horn, who was briefly considered to be the singer, but ultimately it was decided he would just be the producer. And by this point, he'd been, we've talked about his memoir over the summer, and he was really making a name for himself as a producer. I think around this time, he worked with the Art of Noise, who recorded Into Battle with the Art of Noise, February to August 83, and then released October. And then Cinema recorded a bunch of stuff, including a Squire sung version of It Can Happen, a Rabin sung Make It Easy, which is reworked from a demo of his called Don't Give In, and It's Over was another one. Jon Anderson was eventually brought back into the fold. Now, there are many details and it's complicated, but the gist of it is that they ended up getting Jon Anderson back, and I guess there are some lawyers who wanted them to not use a cinema name because they worked for like other bands like trying to use that name. And so with Jon Anderson back, and like they decided, you know what, we should just call this Yes. um so that's basically the gist of that story. Now, over the case of this album being made, John was brought back toward the end, and Tony Kaye left when apparently Trevor Horn wanted Rabin to play keyboards for a session. And so, the album was finished with Trevor Rabin on keyboards. Later on, Eddie Jobson was brought in, but left when it was decided that Kaye should return, and they were thinking of having two keyboardists. And Eddie wasn't really feeling like he was meshing with everyone. Just to simplify like what happened. But
That's
yeah,
a interesting alternate universe if you consider um, Eddie's virtuosity on violin and keyboards, how that could have worked with Eddie, switching to violin here and there. I think that would have been cool, but it would have been
yeah.
a whole different thing, and it might not have been as successful or successful at all. It might have been way too proggy, or you know,
Yeah, it would have been an interesting scenario because the album was already finished and he was there for the shooting of the Owner of Only Heart music video, and then they edited him out as much as possible. So I'd be curious like how he would have felt during Big Generator when everyone wasn't like getting the ball rolling as quickly as would have been preferable, like maybe Eddie would have quit pretty early in that process for all we
yeah,
know.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and there was like a lot of stuff going on in the music scene. So John had released and toured his animation album in '82.
One of
John
my
and
favorites by him.
Yeah, John and Vangelis released their third album, Private Collection, in May 1983. Let's see, already read that thing about Trevor Horn. Eddie Jobson released the Green Album in 1983. And, outside of these guys, Rush had released Signals in September 1982. King Crimson were recording Three of a Perfect Pair, their third
Oh,
album in this
my
new
favorite,
era.
my favorite King Crimson album. I
Yeah.
saw that tour. It was amazing at the Greek Theater in LA, and it's one of my favorite concert videos, as vintage as it is now, 40 years. But that was a great album, great playing by Bill Bruford and his backup band King Crimson. Just an interesting time. If you look at what King Crimson did and what Rush did, King Crimson still stayed on that proggy, esoteric sort of path, and Rush went. I hate to use this word, but people will understand what I mean. A bit more poppy or commercial, and it was the debut of the first Rush keyboard album. So a lot of
Yeah.
interesting things and more that Stephen will talk about were happening during this, and in my opinion, this album blew them all out of the water, from cover to vinyl and every medium since.
Oh, wow, that's a bold claim.
It's
Yeah,
true, and I'll get more into that as we talk about this. Yeah, in review, we're gonna go
right.
song by song, folks.
Yeah, and Asia had released their second album, Alpha, in August 1983. The band members weren't very happy with that album at that time. So, there's stuff happening
It's
there.
interesting. I think a lot of it's great, but the production is a bit more squashed than the
Mm,
first album. If you listen to it, the song um, "The Heat Goes On," that's my favorite song on the album. Jeff Downs does an amazing Hammond organs solo, but there's something about the overall sonic quality that's too compressed, and it could have been blown wide open. So I think they kind of missed the boat on that. Maybe that's why they weren't happy. But a lot of stuff going on this year,
yeah, the Moody Blues released The Present that same month, and second album of the Patrick Moraz era for that
right?
band. And
Look at all these yes
Genesis,
dudes doing all this activity, right?
yeah, and Genesis recorded Genesis that spring and released it in
And I always wondered
October.
how they came up with that album name.
Yeah. So one of the questions, like, we'll circle back to the tracks, but one of the questions I had for you, Dad, is, in the 1980s, there were all these changes going on. What was the first band or artist that you noticed was like adapting to a new 1980s feel, and it felt like really different from
It-
before.
that's a great question. It was probably the Signals Rush album and
Okay.
Genesis. Yeah. But
Uh,
if I could interject, when this album came out that we're talking about, it way surpassed them. And I don't remember the order of the releases. I don't remember the order I listened to them. But if you took Rush and then the Genesis album, then this, or in any order, this album way surpassed them. I really believe that. It was like, this is the 90s in the early 80s. I
oh
was
wow.
20 when this came out. And I remember the tour so vividly, and then 9012 live, the whole we'll get into that, but I think it was Rush and Genesis. That's when people that's when that's when old timers started to really hate on Genesis. Like they felt they sold out. Dun 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 dun. Dun. Like they went so commercial, whereas people wanted more suppers readies. You know,
Yeah.
and and signals. What's with all these fucking keyboards? And Alex didn't like that album that much, even though he was playing on it. It's great. So that's a great question. Um, you weren't quite around yet, but you were a
Right.
thought because I always wanted a son like you. No offense, Alex, one of my other sons. But when you listen to music of that era, answer that same question. Where does that sit for you? Who do you think adapted mostly to the 80s that were around, before?
Yeah, because you make a good point that King Crimson remained esoteric, like they weren't really going with the trend.
Right.
Genesis definitely got more poppy,
They almost overcorrected, in my
yeah,
opinion. No,
yeah.
really, I think they did. Like I remember listening to that album in the car for the first time on cassette, and it was, some of it was progressive, some of it was like, what is this doing on this album? Over time I understand it more, but you're right. They were just like, what are you doing with this? It's Genesis.
Yeah, like it's been a while since I've listened to their 80s albums, but I do remember like that being a very huge shift for them. And this was also a huge shift
Wait, did you
for
say a huge shit?
Shift.
Oh, huge shift. Sorry.
Yeah. But it was also a huge change for Yes, although they still had the rocky moments, like, rock songs within the poppy stuff. And
They
so did
had
Rush and so did Asia. So I think out of these bands, Genesis, unless I'm like misremembering, feels like the one that tried to sound the most like 80s pop, I
and
guess you
kind
could
of
say.
almost jump on that top 40 trend, whereas the others stayed a little bit more true to the ethos of what the band was all about. I think you mentioned that, yes, with 90125 stayed more proggy, even though they got, obviously with Owner of a Lonely Heart, and there's a couple other songs we'll cover that I think fall into that, but they kept the progginess, the energy, the rockiness, and the odd time signatures, like with changes and the dynamics and the vocals, that have been a signature of Yes since the first album. And my favorite song, All Good People. Wait, what?
So, do you remember how you first became aware of 90125 and
Yeah,
like your first time listening to the whole album?
yeah. And even though that's not a staged question, folks, Steve's heard the answer before, but he might not remember. So a few weeks ago, we interviewed Trevor Rabin. He'll be on again, what, December, what?
November 18th,
Oh,
I
November
believe.
18th. Oh, sooner than I thought. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm looking
Cool.
at the
Yeah, we're
schedule.
going to into a deep dive with Trevor, whereas the previous interview was about a solo album. But my
Yeah,
point
we'll
is,
we'll talk a little bit more about that, but yeah,
okay.
we'll be talking about other stuff too. But yeah, that's on November 18th at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. UK time.
Yeah. So it might be 7 p.m. UK time because Germany's 8 hours ahead now. But anyway, I
Hmm.
was working in a silk screen shop. We made all the mirror and glass work for every waterbed manufacturer. And I, being having such a strong work ethic that I do, I was working late. There was no one else in the shop, and this DJ came on the workshop speakers from KLOS or KMET, big LA stations at the time. KLOS still is, and said, "Here's a new song from Yes." And when it first started with the, my first thought was, "What the hell are those trash cans that Alan, like, what's going on here?" And I just stopped working and I stood there with hands full. It was just, what the hell's going on here? And I was immediately adored and endeared to it, and I couldn't wait for the album to come out. I still have the volume and the volume and the album, the vinyl. I have the vinyl album still, and the tour. Oh, I should pull that out. I'll get it. I'll get it.
Yeah.
But that
And
was my first introduction, and it actually blew my mind. And I'm going to tie in a fun fact to Steven Shinder and Trevor Rabin and 90125. So when Trevor joined Yes, he was only 29. And I remember the headlines in print. I remember the voice when they introduced that song, new guitar player. He's in his 20s still, all this. Well, Steve turned 29 yesterday, November 6th. So there you go. But
yeah.
I don't know if you know this, Steve. We've never talked about this. Here's a nugget you may or may not know. I'd love for the fans to chime in. When the press release first came out about the album, there was either a misprint or someone didn't understand what was going on, and they said it featured Trevor Horn on guitar.
Oh, yeah. I could see how,
Yeah,
yeah,
two
someone would
Trevors.
get,
Go
yeah,
figure.
two Trevors,
Yeah, but
but
I knew he was a bass player, but I thought, yeah, I don't see that. I don't know. And then when I heard that song in the workshop, and it came out with that song and the introduction of and Tony Kaye, it was like, wow, three original founding members. Alan, who's been with them since '72, and this South African Jewish guy. What? Rabinowitz? Okay, yeah, let's make it Rabin. We're gonna make it Rabin. And the album's spectacular. But what about you? What was the first time you heard it? I think I know. You were like 3 or 4.
so, and just to circle back, it will be 8 p.m. UK time, that interview.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah, so this album, I don't remember if I listened to the studio album when I was that young, but like you've alluded to, when I was very little, I would watch the 9012 live video and also the Yes Years documentary. And the Yes Years documentary began with that 9012 live performance of Leave It. I guess
Right.
at that time they thought, okay, this is still a somewhat popular song, although like it's kind of wild to think that over time it's kind of become not as popular as say Owner of a Lonely Heart.
I
But
love that song personally.
yeah, and as a little kid, when you see Trevor Rabin with the electric guitar doing all the cool bits, and you also watch like Gumby the movie and his band playing electric guitars, like that's like the coolest thing ever to someone like me as a kid, and it's like you want to be that. And like at that point, like that was my favorite iteration of Yes. Now 2003 2004 is on the Rhino remastered CDs come out. I got let me make sure this is in frame. I got the 90125 CD with the bonus tracks when that came out in 2004.
That's my
And
favorite Roger Dean cover, by the way.
yeah, he went very simplistic for that decade. Yeah. um and at that time, I'd collected a couple other of the remastered CDs by that point. I know for sure that you'd gotten me Relayer and Going for the One, and I was really enjoying those. But 90125, it was like, yes, I've rediscovered my favorite iteration, and for a time, it was probably my favorite Yes album, but that changed over time as I listened to more of the
So
studio albums and my tastes evolved.
I have a question about that. Was 90125 the album and the iteration of the band your favorite at the time because it was easier to get your head around? I mean, compared to Gates of Delirium, there's some sing along stuff there. You know what I mean? Is that part of it? That was just easier to grasp and remember, and it was more
I
mind
I
friendly.
don't think so. I really do think it boils down to me being a kid thinking the electric guitar is the coolest shit ever, you know?
Well, other
And
than
like the
drums,
way that he would play it on these songs.
but other than
Um
drums.
right. Um
That's
um
interesting.
yeah, I had another thought that I was it'll come back, but
About
yeah,
the first time you heard it?
um no, I don't think so. Oh, so also, like as a kid, we'd listen to the Talk Tour recordings that
Yeah.
had stuff like, Cinema and Owner of a Lonely Heart with the Make It Easy intro. I always thought that was cool. Like we must have listened to that version of Owner of a Lonely Heart like 1,000
More than
times. I,
ever, yeah.
I always wanted to listen to it more than anything. Um,
I remember that.
but yeah. So should we go track by track and
Yeah.
then get to these other questions and then read the fan comments that came
Yeah.
in? All right. So first track is a little obscure tune called "Owner of a Lonely
It's
Heart."
okay. Next is hold on. Oh, just kidding. Oh, so I
Yeah.
want to I want to give a shout out to our friend Stephen Lamb.
Is this
Amazing
about
book.
something is this about his book or
Yeah. Yeah, it's about his book and the 90125 part. This book is great, but the 90125 coverage and his breakdown is great. Um, and I read something recently, and I, I honestly don't remember if it was in that book. Sorry, Stephen, the other Stephen Lamb, or if it was Trevor
Oh,
Horn about Alan's drumming and how it was
okay.
not programmed. That's actually him playing to a click. And those are actually and Alan doing playing those orchestra hits on what was called the it was called the emulator or the emu. And I remember that keyboard coming out. It had a big floppy disk slot and all this. Like, there's some things about how that album was made that I thought were less organic than they really were, which excited me.
Mm.
You know, yeah. So, Owner of a Lonely Heart, what's your take?
Yeah, and just real quick, the name of the book. We had Stephen Lamb on to talk about Yes, every album, every song, but he and Dave Watkinson also a while back worked on a book called Yes in the 1980s, which also had coverage of this era. Um, but yeah, so my take on Owner of a Lonely Heart. For the longest time as a kid, it was my favorite Yes song. And I think part of that is just I loved seeing the band member interactions on the 9012 live performance. Like they seemed like they'd have a good time and go up to each other, and the stage looked really cool. Trevor's solo was amazing. But over time, it's become like one of my least favorite Yes songs.
Is
And
it what my All Good People is to your.
yeah, yeah, I guess you could say that. And it kind of it needed to happen to give Yes success, but it does kind of irritate me that for some people this is the only Yes song they know.
Yeah,
But for
yeah.
some people that was a gateway into some of the other stuff. So there's pros and cons to
Yeah.
that, and I can't really complain about the pros.
Yeah. It is a great commercial song, and it's cited in this book. It's cited in Trevor Horn's memoir about how that all went down in the studio and all that stuff. So that's interesting. Okay, next is hold on, wait,
Yeah,
maybe the answer's waiting for you.
yeah, not to be confused with Holding On from the Union album.
Yeah. Insert toilet flush sound here. Oh, just kidding. Um, I love that song. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. It might not Or I don't know. Do you think it sounds as futuristic as Owner of a Lonely Heart did at the time, or did it sound a bit more standard? Because I'm kind of
Running
leaning
it
toward the
through in my
latter.
head, that's a great question. I it doesn't sound as futuristic, except for the production. Thank you, Trevor Horn. It's the production is great on that song, whereas and that's what's interesting that those songs are paired up together. You hear "Owner of a Lonely Heart." That's very. I'm gonna use. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. The words gated,
Mm,
clean, pristine, and then hold on just opens up with the layered vocals and it's more of a live sound and I commend Trevor Horn for being able to put both those two scales together and especially right next to each other. So I love the liveness of it, the organic sound of it. I like that song and it's a pretty simple song. It's easy to sing along to and remember. If we grew up in Japan, didn't speak English, we'd still know the song. It's one of those.
mm. Yeah, I do think maybe the talk, the simple small, such put, those
Oh,
vocal
yeah,
harmonies
that's
do sound
right. The
kind of
bridge.
futuristic now that
Yeah,
I
the
think about
bridge
it.
is absolutely futuristic. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a good song, but I think it's smart that it's not the first track. They have Owner of a Lonely Heart as the
So, is
first
there a
track.
track you'd rather be the first? I do. Should we go there yet or wait?
Um, let's
Let's,
wait until after we go
yeah,
through these tracks and then say
you're
how we
right.
think they could be rearranged.
Yeah.
So next one is It Can Happen.
To
Uh,
you,
yeah,
it can
ki-
happen to me.
yeah, it's got that really nice opening with the plucking with do 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 do
And the
do do.
sitar, which
Yeah,
is
the
reminiscent
sitar.
of Steve Howe and the whole yes sound.
Yeah, so a little bit of an outlier that one. Um,
And prominent Chris Squire vocals, which I love. I love when Chris sings lead or is very prominent in the mix, and that's the first one that we get that with.
yeah, it's I really like the sound of it, the ambiance, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, I think there's some really cool stuff that's done with the lyrics. Like it's very catchy. There's also that weird voiceover thing in the middle,
Oh
which
yeah,
apparently is
which
from the importance of being earnest or something.
yeah. Oh, I
Um,
should look that up in Stephen's book. It's from
yeah,
something from the 50s, right?
I think it's from the importance of being earnest, if
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
correctly. Um, but yeah, it's very. You can definitely sing along to each of these songs so far.
Oh,
And
both of
then
them or
yeah,
three of them. Sorry.
and then next you have Changes,
Uh,
and that's probably the most progressive sounding song on side one, right?
yeah, I would have opened with that, but
Oh, okay.
I understand that the record company wanted people to put it on and go, "Oh my gosh!" That Pablo meeting average music fan, no offense, people, where they would hear a hit, but Changes is very yes, even though the lineup and that era is as far away from the yes of the 70s could be. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, and you also get some more Trevor Rabin on lead for this one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
it,
the
it
trade off vocals and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it's a very personal sounding song, really going through the emotions. And there's some clever stuff with the lyrics, like your heart is inside your head. Like, I totally know what that means. Like the way he sings
One
that, and then
word
John's
from
like,
you,
one word from,
from
yeah,
you,
that.
one word from me. A clear design on your liberty. Yeah, that's a great passage. And then
Yeah.
it just sort of sinks into ambient. Do 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 do.
Only such fools, only such
Do do.
jealous hearts.
Only for
Yeah,
changes.
whenever I think of that song, I always think of the weird edit on the 902 Live video where it shows like split screen, like Trevor
Yeah,
and Chris, and then Trevor two times. It's real weird, but
yeah.
yeah.
So maybe on Sunday, I might do a Drum Talk TV vlog playing that song and a couple others.
Okay. Yeah, we'll post about that if it happens.
Yeah.
Um,
To
and then
be,
we get
if it
to
happens for you, if it, oh,
and then we get to side two,
side
which be
two, if you're a vinyl or cassette person.
right. We get
We're
to
talking about the way it was released in that context.
yeah, we get to Cinema, the 2-minute instrumental.
Okay, that should be the first song. Into Changes.
Yeah, I was surprised you didn't say that
Yeah,
first.
brain senior moment in my 60s, senior moment. Because I could hear the end of that that would, but we'll get to that. What do you think of that song? Where does that sit for you in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tracks? Where does that sit?
I don't know where I'd rank it, but it clearly it would have been a great opener for the album, and they thought it was a great opening for the concert. So, um, it really has a huge presence. It's bombastic, and again, I'm really
I was
curious
trying to turn it on. Sorry.
what the 20-minute version would have sounded
Oh
like if it's
yeah.
even
When did we
listenable.
get that?
Yeah, I don't know. Like Trevor told us it might be on a tape somewhere, but it might be lost or I'd have to listen to that interview
And I
again.
think you
So
said, look in the fridge or something like that. So, uh, as an instrumental, is that the only Yes instrumental?
no.
What would be
Uh
another?
well, if you count duet and solo pieces, we've got Even Song on Union.
Oh,
We've got
okay.
Sign Language on Keys to Ascension 2. Um
I was gonna say let's not count solo tracks, but as a band, you're right. Sign language, but this is the best. This is the best, I think, instrumental as a band. It's
okay.
invigorating. It's energy. It's like what's
It
coming.
definitely sounds cinematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and the way Trevor plays the fretted guitar reminisces absolutely with Steve Howe playing the slide. So it ties the eras together in a way.
Mm, yeah. And then after that, we go into Leave It, which
Which there's
starts
like
off a
9 versions
cappella.
of, or
Uh,
7.
More than that, I think there's something like 17 versions of the video.
Wow.
So it's something in the teens. I don't
Yeah.
remember the number off the top of my head. But yeah, it starts off a cappella and it's very catchy. Um, and there's like some great, switching from Rabin to Anderson and the big drum sound, that doo doo, and then
Yeah. So can I express a slight disappointment with that?
okay.
If you watch the 9012 live movie, especially if you're a musician or a drummer, I don't think Alan's playing. I hope
Mm,
I'm wrong, and I'm okay if people yell at me. But I say that because most of the percussion was on tape, and I know that because if you watch what he's playing on two Simmons drums, and you hear all the other music, and I was at the show. I was at that show about even with the soundboard booth and all that. And I remember looking down into the soundboard and seeing this 1 inch tape playing. So
mm.
I thought, okay, so a lot of this is on tape. Some of the voices, and I was a little disappointed. Now, 40 years later, I'm not. I'm not. But at the time, I was like, what's Yes doing playing the tape? But they're playing to a tape of themselves. And in these days, you would call that hitting a foot switch, and it's a sequencer of an arpeggio or something of the keyboards, which Getty's done since 80 or 81 with signals, by the way. So I've softened up on that, but I remember at the time seeing the tape machine, like looking on stage and going, I don't see him playing what I'm hearing, and looking down and seeing the sound booth and the tape machine and doing that. I don't give a fuck as much as I did then. You know what I mean? I don't want to be that critical, but I want to point that out that that's part of the process and how they reproduced that amazing song live. And I love that song. That's one of my favorites on there. It
Yeah. Eh,
embodies, it brings, I'm sorry, it brings forward into the future what made Yes Yes in the beginning, and that's the chorale, the vocals. And here they are from 1968 to 1983, and they still got it, but in a bigger, fatter, liver, more live sound. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And a while ago, we had Kevin Godley, one of the people who worked on the music video on our show.
Right.
And yeah, that song was a huge deal. It had like a single remix and maybe a couple other remixes. Like it was a huge thing
You should
going
put a
on at the
link in the
time.
comments. Oh, there's a couple comments. We'll get to that in a moment.
Right. Um, and also, Owner of a Lonely Heart got like an extended remix, which once you've heard the first 10 seconds, 20 seconds, I'd say you've heard all of it. It's just kind of
Oh, really?
repeating the
It's
same
only at the
thing.
front end?
What do you mean?
I mean, the remix, you said once you've heard the first 20 seconds, you've heard all of it? Is that?
Yeah, because it repeats the same thing over and over again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's one of those.
Who did that? Steve Wilson?
Uh, no, that's Steve Wilson would have been way later. I'm talking about like in the 80s, like in the
Oh,
actual
okay.
80s.
Okay.
Um, so then the next song is
Our
Our Song.
song.
Yeah, which was only played at maybe a couple shows on the
He hit the
90125 tour.
eject button. I think, and I wish they would have dropped it down a step and a half in keys and see if that would have worked because I love that song. It's full of energy. I love the vocal cadence. Toledo was just another pit stop along the Good
Mm,
King's Highway. It just keeps you moving, you know. And that would be a. I'd love to have a live rendition of that. Um,
yeah.
do you like that
Um,
song?
yeah, I'm just looking up like how many times it was played. I'm like looking at Forgotten Yesterday says 36 and I'm like, "Wait, what? Like
No, I
actually?"
thought it was
Or
like 8 or something.
yeah, I thought it was fewer, so I don't know what's going on there, but
Yeah.
um
They
yeah,
eat a lot of magic mushrooms. Whatever.
I think it's a fun song.
That's a great
Eh,
word for it. Yeah.
yeah, and I actually have a funny story, which I don't want to dwell too much on, but when I got the 90125 CD and in school, I would like sing a bits of the song now and then, once in a while, and there's that part where it's like my fortification took me by surprise, and one of the teachers at my school thought I said something else, and I had to like pull out a dictionary or show them the word that I was actually saying, and they're like, "Oh, okay."
What grade were you in, and what word did they think you say?
Well, people can figure it out. I don't really want to say it, so yeah, it's pretty
40.
easy to figure out.
Uh,
But
well, I ask
anyway,
because I don't know.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Um, but it's a really cool song. There's interesting like words used in there, which were my first time hearing them, like mystification and
Yeah, and that's
um,
another one with some off time stuff. Da 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 bum. Ba da ba da ba. Ba da ba da ba. Da 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 bum. Ba da 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 da.
yeah,
It's a great cooking song. I love that song.
yeah. It's
That's
really
way up
got
there for
high
me.
energy on it. It's really good.
Yeah.
And then we get City of Love, which when I was a kid, I thought that and Shock to the System were the same song when I watched the Yes Here's
Oh,
video.
wow. I never made that connection, but interesting.
Yeah.
So I
Uh,
like City of Love. I think it's way longer than it should be.
mm,
I I hate to criticize my favorite band, but I just think it kind of, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think it's too long. I do love it musically. I can see how the lyrics might not feel yes like. You know, it's the same thing with like Rhythm of Love where or the music video anyway, where like it feels kind of like not very yes because of the subject matter. But I think like the music itself is really good and it's a rocker, that one, you know.
That's true. Yeah. City of Love, City of Love, City of Love, City of Love. Bam, 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 bam. Hey! All right.
Yeah.
Next, we
And
get
then
one of
yeah.
my favorite Yes songs, actually. All good. I mean, Hearts. I love that song. That the dynamics and the just the whole groove, and then it floats out along the river. The sound matches the vocals and the lyrics in this song. I love this song. What is this for you amongst the nine?
Yeah, this was for a while my favorite song on the
Really?
album.
Wow.
Yeah, and it feels. I think some could argue that it sounds closer to what they think of when it comes to like the classic Yes sound, I guess you could say. But you know, as a kid, like
That's
if
interesting.
there are some songs where it's like, okay, this is what you know, it's talking about love, talking about romance. This is what
Talk
all that
about
stuff is
love.
like.
Oh, sorry.
And,
Sorry.
and also, I have this weird thing where I hear this song, I think of the specific memory of reading a Goosebumps book while listening to the song. It's really weird.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Which one?
I feel like it's one where it involves like a squirrel or something. I can't remember which one, but
Hmm.
yeah, like I would read Goosebumps while listening to this album, so that's like kind of a little memory that's kind of
That's
stuck
interesting.
with me.
I
Yeah.
never knew that. I love Hearts. I think it's up there along par with. This is going to freak people out. Composition wise, if you took Siberian Khatru, To Be Over, Hearts, Turn of the Century, those to me all kind of fit together as far as the
Mm.
mood ranges and whatnot. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I think that could be an interesting album. I don't know what you'd call it, but Hearts. I forgot what I said now.
Turn of the
No,
century.
yeah, Turn of the Century, To Be Over. Maybe throw in. Oh, there's a song from um, Open Your Eyes. Believe it or not, folks, that I think would
Oh,
be a good fit.
is it From the Balcony?
Yes, that's it. And
Okay.
also the Ladder. There's a couple songs
Oh yeah,
that,
if only you knew, it would
yep,
be a good
yeah.
day.
To me, that's a nice collection
Yeah,
that
that's like a
transcends different
subgenre of
Yes
Yes
eras.
music. Yeah.
Yeah, we should do an episode on that. Like, what albums or no, I'm sorry, what songs could be canonized as certain feels?
Yeah.
Compartmentalize them, you know. So, folks, send in your ideas.
Yeah.
Where
So
does that?
what
Yeah, go ahead.
like I said, for a while that was my favorite Yes song, but these days I'm kind of wondering if maybe now it's changes. That's my favorite song on this album.
Interesting.
Do you have like a number one favorite from this album?
I'm gonna say I'm looking at the list, folks. When I look over here, I'm gonna say it's I should know. I'm gonna say uh it's such. I'm gonna link I'm gonna link cinema with changes and call that one song because that's my opener for the concert. If we were to do that, So there you go. I know that's cheating. So to undo the cheat, I'd say changes has to unwind that with the vocals. Yeah. Changes is
Okay.
great.
Yeah. And apparently that bit was in a Kit Kat commercial at some point.
Really?
Yeah, like I was reminded of it when listening to a Yes Music podcast. They did like an 80s episode recently and Mark mentioned that commercial and I was like, "Oh yeah, I think I remember seeing that on YouTube." Like it had the do 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 do.
Really?
It's
Are
really
you able to
weird.
see the show on another device
Uh
right
what
now?
see the what?
The show, our show.
Yeah.
So I think I have a virus. Hold on, because I
What?
can't. I'm sorry, folks. Just hold on. I can't navigate this. Something's taking over. Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! It's Dave Watkinson. Dave has infiltrated our hard drives, and there he is with his 90125 outfit and
Yeah, this is
uh,
a photo,
our,
folks.
yeah, that's our friend Dave Watkinson from an esteemed Yes podcast called.
No, that's no.
Oh, just kidding.
He's he's an author of a
Author,
couple
journalist. Yeah,
Yes books. I did Jon Anderson and the Warriors wrote to Yes, and also
right.
worked on Yes in the 1980s with Stephen Lamb.
So, Dave, why don't you
Um,
have a podcast? Like, what's going on there?
yeah, I mean he's guested on some of their
Yeah,
episodes
absolutely.
and a
That's
couple of
where I got
ours.
confused. I'm old and I got faded memory and whatever. So,
Right, but
Steve.
he did leave a comment. He said, "Great album, and yes, needed it. The
Oh yeah, let's go through
songwriting,
fan comments.
yeah, the songwriting, playing, and production are top class. The tour was brilliant, a cool stage design, and the sweatshirts were fabulous.
Oh,
All in all, these were very exciting times as a fan."
absolutely. It was like the rebirth of Yes, and even Rick Wakeman says, had that not happened, there would have been no Yes Forward since then, and I totally agree. Right? Do
I mean,
you?
that's a good question
It's a big
because,
statement, but I think it's valid, especially coming from Rick. That's a huge ass
well,
statement.
that's actually a question I want to ask. So, was whether Yes could have still reformed because could something like ABWH, but maybe without Bruford and White instead, like, could that have happened at the end of the 80s? Or could Yes have reunited with the classic lineup in 95, like they eventually did, and allegedly made a pact to do so years prior? I know this album is really important to Yes history, but I feel like I'm not 100% convinced that Yes wouldn't have reunited regardless at some later point, if that
That's
makes sense.
reasonable. This
Like I'm not
intercepted
undercutting
that.
the album, but it's just,
Right. No,
it's like,
this probably intercepted what you're saying.
yeah, like if anything, this album accelerated the process of Yes coming back, so they only had like a 2-year break basically.
Right, because what you're saying has shown through history that they kept coming back, regrouping, coming back. So it's likely it would have happened. But what
Right.
would we have gotten? Can you
Yeah.
imagine? Can you imagine what it's like being? I don't
Yeah,
know.
and I actually had like a we have a few other questions
Yeah,
which we could go through and then go through these other
questions and
comments.
some fan comments. I knew
Yeah.
this would be a robust episode. This is a landmark album. Thank you, Trevor Horn. I'm going to give him a lot of the credit, not just for the whole Yes rebirth, Yes regrouping, all the great songs, but Trevor's known as the guy who invented the 80s. This is part of that. As
Yeah.
much as Frankie goes to Hollywood and all that other stuff, this is part of that.
Yeah.
You
So
have to include it.
another thing I was wondering was, could cinema have been successful whether it be with or without Anderson, or did the Yes name fill more seats than the cinema name would otherwise have if they used
Honestly,
that?
that's such a great question. I think, and folks, chime in whether you're watching live or on the archive, because that's a great question. I think it still would have succeeded hugely with the Yes name. It filled different seats.
Sorry, with the yes name
With the
or
Yes name, it added seats from that, tribe.
right?
Whereas
Yeah.
without the Yes name, I think it still would have been hugely successful no matter what you'd call it Uncle Fartnick, and it probably would have done well. Well, maybe not though,
Yeah.
but
What
but
like
what do you think to the
I
answer to
think
your own question?
yeah, I think cinema would have still been successful. I'm just wondering, like, would it have been to the same extent? Like, it's hard for me to fathom whether the Yes name really amplified the success a huge amount, or if cinema could have made a name for itself a similar way that Asia did. You had these prog rock
That's a good
legends, but
point.
it's a new band, new name, new
That
sound.
poppy music. That's a great point. So let me ask you this. With your question, you're saying with the same material and same lineup?
Well, it could be a couple of different lineups. You could have the pre-Jon Anderson lineup, or you could have the lineup with Jon Anderson. In which case, I guess if certain people are in the lineup, there will be Yes fans flocking to see this band anyway.
I think the answer is coincidentally yes. It would have been very successful no matter what you call it, and with or without John. But John definitely brought a lot more weight and credibility is probably not the right word, not to minimize everybody else, but it kind of tied the knot, the loop, put a
Mm,
bow on it, if you will.
yeah. Um, and oh, we sort of alluded to this earlier. So, rearranging the tracking order. So, I do think they could have begun with the instrumental cinema, but then go into Owner of a Lonely Heart, and then
Oh, that works.
yeah, and then maybe do what was the idea I had in my head? Um, like okay, then maybe do Hold On, It Can Happen, and then Our
Miracle of
Song.
Life. Oh,
And then side two could be Changes, Leave It, City of Love, and Hearts. So that's kind of an idea I had in my head.
so would that change if there were no sides and you looked at it as one continuous CD or performance?
Maybe
Because
slightly.
that kind of changes the whole game, right? The format dependent set lists make a difference in my mind.
Yeah, I think if I were thinking just CD, like if sides weren't an issue, I think maybe I would leave Changes where it is and then have that go into Leave It and Our Song, City of Love and Hearts. So really, Cinema would be the only one moved to the front for me.
Interesting. So I have a couple. One is cinema into changes. One is cinema into leave it, which we all know. I would love our song to be much more on the forefront on side one. In fact, maybe right after Owner of a Lonely Heart.
Mm,
Because to me, it's a very, I don't like the word commercial, but I'm gonna say fan friendly song, music fan friendly song.
okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, City of Love, honestly, might be my least favorite song on the album. With the
Mm,
tempo and it being as long as it is, I don't know. Hearts to me is the masterpiece piece. Does that make sense?
yeah, it's like
It's the
a
mini epic on
yeah
there.
mini epic.
Yeah. Um, I've never. I just realized this. Duh. I've never heard this album on shuffle, and I'd like to do that just to kind of see what comes up.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. So,
Um,
folks, tell us what you think. This is a great album, but let's go to some fan comments. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and then we could circle back to a couple other questions.
Okay. Do you
Uh,
want to do the questions first?
Um, well, okay, we'll try to get through them quickly, I guess. So,
Okay.
Is there progressive rock on this, in your opinion?
Absolutely 100%. Yeah, especially in the context of the time. It was a little more commercial friendly, but changes, hearts, cinema, all of it. Yeah, all of it.
Okay, yeah, there's definitely prog on this, but I think I would call it a commercial prog rock album, perhaps, or
That's
pop
fair.
prog or something.
Yeah, Mood for a
Um,
Day might be the exception. Wait, what?
um, where would you? Oh, oh, so there are also like some music videos. You know, Owner had a couple. There was a famous one with a weird like guy on the run and the bugs, and it's really gross. And there's like the low budget beach one.
Yeah.
Um, it can happen. Opens on a boat, and you hear something on a different language, and then you see the band playing, and they've got makeup on, and there's glowing light behind them. And Leave It, you know, they're standing around with these leather jackets. I think we actually have like a lineup pic of like the band wearing leather jackets around this time.
Oh,
But
let's show that. You're right. You're absolutely right. Thank you for the reminder.
right,
Here
but
they are.
what?
There they are.
Yeah, but what are your overall thoughts on the music videos that came out of this album and the overall vibe?
Owner of a Lonely Heart. That video is awesome without music. I don't get the connection. The
Yeah, the
video,
band members morphing into animals.
yeah, that whole and the guy walking against traffic. I don't get it. And the owner of a Lonely Heart with them on the beach. Yeah, that's cool. They're jamming. That's okay. Um,
Yeah. Like it's a weird video, the more famous one. It's almost like the band is threatening the guy to listen to their album when they're like
yeah,
get closing in on him.
and I think I think that whole thing might have been a part of the try to fit into the '80s thing.
Yeah.
The director or record company said, like, you guys gotta do something that doesn't make sense. John, we know your vocals have been doing that, but we're talking about videos now. I just think that something weird went on there, but because the videos in the 9012 Live make more sense, as weird as they are, with Leave It and all that stuff. City of Love,
Yeah.
you know, there's
I'm
some
actually
context there.
yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised, and maybe it's fortunate that they didn't, that there was no music video for City of Love. You know, they could have very easily like set it in a city and there's like
There wasn't?
some no, well, just 9012 Live, but
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, but there was no like um one where they're actors in a city and like there's some romance thing going on. Like
Right.
it's kind of surprising that there wasn't, but in my opinion, I guess kind of fortunate in
Yeah.
a way.
Yeah.
Where would you rank 90125 among the Rabin era albums?
I'd say
Just
two.
saying something so that oh, two?
Yeah. I love Talk.
Okay.
And I love Big Generator musically, but the production really, really ruins the music. Sorry, it does. It does. It's squashed. It's mid EQ heavy. Those songs really should breathe, and they don't on that album. You know,
Yeah, Talk is my favorite Rabin era album as well, but
Miracle of
I,
Life is just. I love that song, even though it's
oh,
not
on Union, yeah.
part of that. Yeah, that's my favorite Trabin era. You should put out an album called Trabin. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's my
but
favorite Trevor song. I love, love, love that song. Very progressive, but not like I can't get my head around this. It's not like that.
right. So yeah, even though Talk is my favorite, I think the case could be made that 90125 might be the better put together album
Oh,
production
that's a
wise in a
good
way.
take, and
So
that's thanks to Trevor Horn.
yeah,
That's
so I
all
think
Trevor
it's
Horn, right?
yeah,
Don't you
so I
think?
think it's my second favorite behind Talk out of that era.
Yeah. The recording is amazing. It's a leap into the future beyond any other recording that came out within a year or two in either direction, I think.
Yeah. Oh, what's the legacy of this album? Pretty much all of it got played live at some point on the original tour, and then a few trickled out in later Rabin era tours and ARW, and a couple on the latter tour. So, in your
It's
opinion, what's the legacy of this album?
I think that
Yeah, I'm just saying something so that if anyone's listening on audio, they don't think
yeah,
something
yeah,
wrong
Dan
happened.
is thinking. The gears are turning, they're
Yeah.
sieging up and there's smoke. I think this album, I might blow you away with this because we have not. That's a great question. We've not. This album is as pivotal in Yes's anthology as Fragile or Close to the Edge. It really
Yeah.
is. Rick Wakeman has so much has said so without saying that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think there are very few Yes albums where you look at them and you're like, oh, this was an entry point for a huge chunk
Right,
of the Yes fandom. And
right.
90125 was one of those, along with the Yes album,
Generations
Fragile,
jumped on
Close to the
board that
Edge.
weren't even familiar with Yes, with that.
Yeah. And there are some
Even
comments
wait,
that reflect that, even. Yeah.
yeah, even people my age in their 60s that weren't into Yes heard that and took some of the dive. No matter how shallow or deep, it introduced them to the band. That might be bigger than Fragile or Close to the Edge now that I think of it that way.
Hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know, because it's definitely the most commercially successful. Although I guess the case could be made for Fragile, but I think when it comes to
And commercial
prog,
meant two different things in 1971 versus 1983
yeah, but I think within the prog bubble, it's not like people know of it, but it's not as big to them
in the
as
prog bubble.
Close to
Yeah.
the Edge, because Close to the Edge sounds proggier, but 90125 definitely is a pivotal part of Yes's history and
Yeah.
definitely a turning point. Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
All right.
so we have,
Fan notes.
yeah, so we read Dave's comment, and then Max Hunt said loved it.
I'm going to go
Um,
to Tony Jefferson, super fan of Yesshift and Drum Talk TV, says, I loved it, especially all the hype that went along with it. That finally made Yes a household name. I saw two shows on tour, and that was my first meeting with Alan White, Jon Anderson, and Tony Kaye. Now, if only I can convince my prog band to learn changes for the upcoming CD. Sorry, I got something in the way. Release party in February.
oh, yeah, okay. I think I copied it twice, but yeah, it ends with February.
Okay, okay, yeah, that would be great, Tony. We would love that. Let
Yeah.
us know where that's going to be, and if you're going to live stream it, I'd be happy to feature it on Drum Talk TV and Yes Shift if Steve says that's okay.
Yeah, we can talk about it if we get more details, but
Yeah,
yeah. And then did see Lotioned. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
that's a Japanese name. No, I'm
Uh,
kidding.
what? Says owner of Only Heart was on heavy rotation on Detroit area rock radio WRIF and WLLZ, and the video was played on many episodes of The Beat, which was a PBS Detroit music video show of the early 80s. That was my first exposure to Yes as an 8-year-old rock fanatic. Yeah, Owner of a Lonely Heart not only got a lot of radio play, it's also popped up in like movies and even video games like Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And it can happen. I remember hearing that at the end of an episode of this show set in the 80s called Glory Days, which aired around 2010, and I was kind of surprised. So some of
Wow,
these
I don't
songs do
know that.
pop up in other places.
That's cool. Landon Murray, that's an actor's name for sure. Landon Murray, starring in, oh, it was the album that basically introduced me to the band. Wow, I'd be curious to know how old you are. Then I saw the live concert in 1984. They were so good, blew me away. That tour, we haven't talked about that. We will. That tour was great. That show blew my mind as well. Way over delivered.
Yeah. And then Austin Owen says, very good album, brought the band back to relevance. I went to many of this shows of this tour, so it holds a special place in my memory of it.
That's a great take. Philip Kilroy says, nowhere near one of Yes's best albums, but it is quality from beginning to end. Changes and Heart are two obvious highlights.
Yeah,
Worthy
that's really
take.
saying something. Like, if it's not near the top for Philip, then pretty much like most, if not all of Yes's albums are like quality, like start to finish and above
Yeah,
other things, you know?
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Garrison Melford says Stone Cold Classic.
Wow, that's great. Mike Connolly says, I used to be dismissive of the whole Rabin area. You know what? Go fuck yourself. Oh, just kidding. Um, the thing that changed my mind were all the live tracks on the old Yes Years box set, especially the arrangement of And You and I, which is true to the original, but full of big 80s sound. I agree. 9012, I said I agree, not Phil. Okay. Mike said, he goes on to say, 90125 still isn't a favorite, but I really do enjoy it. Cinema is a fun mix of old and, at the time, new, and Heart is just a beautiful song. The album really doesn't have a bad tune. It's a well written and well recorded, even if it's not your cup of tea. It's amazing that the band could pull off such a shift in sound 15 years into their career, become relevant to a whole new generation. That is a great take. That's a great take. Here's what's interesting that he points out. It's only 15 years into their career. Most bands
Yeah.
don't last that long. But when you look at where Yes is now, almost their 60th year, and you go back to the context of that, it's a sliver, the second sliver of their career, and it just blows it out of the water. That's pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, like the Beatles lasted like what, 10 years? So 15 seemed
No,
like a
I
huge
think
deal at the
80,
time.
80 years. Isn't Ringo
Did you
Starr
s-
like 210 years old or something? No, you're right. And Led Zeppelin only 9 or 11 albums. Sorry, folks, I should know this. But if you think of how their music has endured with such a short vinyl original release career. Same with Yes, how they kept going, and this absolutely breathed new life into the band and a whole generation or two of Yes fans. So that's a really good take. I like that, Mike.
Yeah, and Timothy Reedy says this year, my opinion is that It Can Happen might be the best non-epic track by Yes. Very tough to beat, even though there are lots of contenders. The album itself started the Trevor Rabin era and the last non-titled album by the band. Yeah, we haven't even talked about the title. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
90125, the catalog number
You want to
after
take a
a.
detour?
Yeah, so I remember on the Classic Artists documentary, someone said that originally it was 90104, and then there was a glitch or something, and they changed it to 90125. But I've also heard a story that the number was originally like 890 something.
FGZ or something.
Yeah, but yeah, like they went with the eventual catalog number 90125. And yeah, I never thought about how like basically that and the debut album don't have a title other than like the band name and the catalog number. That's
I
interesting.
don't think anyone's ever done the catalog number other than Yes. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's ever done that. And did you know I grew up, grandma, remember grandma's house?
Yeah.
Grandpa, that was 901 90307. So
Oh wow.
kind of in that same vein. It wasn't 258Z6 or No, it's interesting how that came along. Yeah, and they got lucky with something that was easy to say and remember and kind of stick. If it was 42831, it was like, pfft, who would name their album that, right? But 90125 just, it's like a hey, 90125.
Yeah, I actually kind of think that Big Generator could have been named after its catalog number.
Which was what?
I remember looking up its catalog number recently, and it seemed easy to. I'll look it up while we're on this.
Okay.
But yeah, also
But
another thing I want to say is that the album art really fits that
oh
era.
yeah,
Like it's
that's a
not
whole
Roger
other
Dean, but
topic.
yeah,
Yeah, when that album art came out, and I have the vinyl, it's back right there in a cabinet right there. It was as futuristic, like we've said it before, Steve, that the you don't judge a book by its cover, but you do. You know what I mean? When
yeah,
they bring you your food at the table, you judge it. This album cover was like, what the hell is in this thing? It
yeah.
had it leapt ahead in time. It was so futuristic that it immediately raised the bar for the musical expectations, and the music lived up to it.
Yeah, and they tried making the that symbol on the cover a sort of recurring symbol on Big Generator. Which I looked it up. According to what I'm looking at, the catalog number was 90522 for Big Generator, and I think that's easy to say. Like they could have named
90522.
it that. Yeah,
Especially after this one having come out.
yeah,
If it stood on its own, I don't know. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but being that if they followed that trend, that be what would they be up to now? Into the 10,000s. All
yeah. I
right, so
mean, they switched between labels, so the numbering could be different depending on the label.
right, so here we have Robert Kaye, who is Tony Kaye's drunk uncle. Who I'm just kidding. Robert Kaye, Robert Kaye says musically, I love some of the songs. Changes, Leave It, Our Song, and really dislike others. City of Love. Historically, I greatly respect Trevor Rabin's contributions to resurrecting the band and making them a number one pop prog hit. Kudos to Squire, White, Kaye, and Anderson, who embraced the new direction. That's a great point. You got to give credit to them morphing, pivoting, and adapting.
Yeah, what's funny is that Trevor Rabin didn't go in with the goal of resurrecting Yes. It
Right.
just sort of happened and like he went along with it.
I
Like
think same
it's
with
yeah.
if the stories we want to believe are true of Trevor Horn and Jeff Downs, they didn't go in with the idea of resurrecting. Yes, with drama, they went in with a couple songs that I've heard that they wrote for the band that they thought
Mm,
would be a fit. So kind of the same
yeah.
thing there.
Yeah, and there's also the story that like they went in thinking they're just gonna meet the band and then they're told a bit later, oh, you're in the band.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Um, Brad Klein says, "Great album, a change of sound, but not energy." So it still has the energy in the music. Got to see the very first show of the tour at Millersville State University.
Wow,
Claire brothers were still fine tuning the setup.
interesting. Um, Jerry Vath says CDs came out in the early 80s. Back in the day, audio magazines rated CDs on sound quality, etc. 90125 was amongst those early releases, heavily, favorably reviewed. I still have the CD, he says in parentheses. So do I. I have the vinyl. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I have the vinyl. Helped catapult Yes into their next era and every era beyond that, I've added. Saw the concert tour at Hershey Park Stadium, among my favorite Yes albums. That's a great review.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Sanders Thornburg says, I was a 90125 baby, turned on to Yes by 90125 right after it was released when I was about 14 years old.
No,
The
wait,
sec
wait, wait, wait. Steve was a 90125 baby. Sorry, but Sanders, you were a 90125 adolescent.
So he goes on, the second Yes album I bought after falling in love with 90125 was Close to the Edge. I was expecting another 90125 and was confused, startled, and frightened by Close to the Edge that I popped it out of my cassette player after the first 5 minutes of listening to it.
With
My con-
sparks and smoke coming out.
my consciousness was simply not prepared to be brought that close to the edge yet. I loved
Wow.
90125 and hated Close to the Edge, but within a year I had immersed myself into the entire back catalog of Yes albums, and Close to the Edge had risen to my favorite Yes album.
That's
Like
called puberty.
like
Sonic puberty.
like so many other 90125 babies or adolescent, I guess, I have to give credit to the commercial success of 90125 for turning me into a lifetime Yes head. 90125 was my doorway into Close to the Edge and all things Yes. That really shows that an entry point like 90125 can really go a long way,
Open the
you know?
door as wide as could be. I love that. That was great. That was. Charles Christopher says, I'll share. I love this album, though I was too young to buy it with my own money when it came out, and I waited till Big Generator was out. I'm sorry. I waited till Big Generator was out to buy it and then hear it all. People say it sounds very 80s, AOR, but teenage me immediately could tell there was something a cut above the likes of, say, Survivor, The Cutting Crew. For one thing, I was immediately drawn to Jon's voice. I still think it is solid, really creative album that holds up against the most adventurous music of that decade. Great take. Great take.
Yeah. Well, what I love about these comments is that we see in some cases how this was people's gateway into
And
Yes. And
and
yeah.
comparisons to what in context. A lot of context is given here. I love that too.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about the tour before we close out?
Yeah.
Where did you see them, if you
Yeah, did you
remember?
see the tour? Oh, never mind. Steve just turned 29 yesterday if you're just joining
Yeah.
us. I saw it and it was amazing. The most unique stage I've ever seen. In the round was cool. This stage was amazing. And the sound was great. The lighting was great. The music was great. Even the tape that they were playing along to and leave it. The whole thing, their outfits were very almost excruciatingly 80s, but they freaking brought it. And people like Trevor was new, but Chris, Alan, Jon, Tony, who had been absent for so long, they showed up and they said, "We are the shit. Smell us stink." I mean, they were so good. It was probably one of the cleanest sonic sonically speaking Yes shows I've ever seen. And that was at the LA Forum.
Yeah, and they played like Looney Tunes before the show or
So
something,
I
right?
have a story about that. When they
Okay.
were gonna do the tour, and a band called not the Clash, another band from that era that kind of sounds the same. I can't think of it. Female singer, can't think of it. They were gonna open for Yes. And
Mm.
when I read this story, I thought, that's not even close to a fit. But what happened was Yes canceled them, and that band sent their management offices like a crate or a package of dead fish.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
nice to be professional, bitches. But what they did play was, I forgot what it's called, but it's the Looney Tunes cartoon with the big red furry guy that has the
Yeah,
music.
Gossamer.
Yeah, that got adapted into Rush's La Villa Strangiato that goes dun 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 when he and Bugs are chasing each other. So that's what was shown on the big screen. Then it went dark. I don't remember if there was a pause with the lights on or if they went right into cinema. I don't remember. But that was very unique. That was cool. And I'm sitting there like an idiot. Yeah, bring on the Flintstones. Oh, yeah, we're here for yes. Never mind.
Hmm.
Yeah, great show. Great show.
Yeah, and like the way that the stage looked, the colors that you see on the stage, like in the 9012 live video, it's like it just always like stuck with me when I was a kid. And I think because of the funny outfits, like what Chris would wear, I'd like putting on a
Funny.
blanket as a cape, pretending I was playing guitar or
And
something.
Chris was dressed like as a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the stage was shaped like the back was like this, then it leveled off, then it went like that. It was just, and it was a grate. The whole thing was a white grate. It was just weird and so futuristic. And now, 40 years later, I'm wearing my old school shirt. It's old stuff. Just amazing how that made such an imprint on live performances and the record itself.
Mm. Yeah.
So there you
Uh,
go. 90125.
yeah.
If you haven't heard it, go hear it. Chime in, even if you're watching on the archive. Steve, that's it. Closing credits
uh,
time.
yeah. I think that's, I mean, there's more that people could say about the album that's been covered in various places, but I think we pretty much gave it its due. And yeah, people can follow us on facebook.com/yesshift. And we also upload these on youtube.com/@yesshift. And check out the podcast audio. We're on various podcast apps. Just search Yes Shift. You'll probably find us. And write to us at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. Feedback, comments, or just a little convo. And yeah,
Show ideas.
thanks for following what we do.
Thanks, everybody. Let's close with more of this. Thanks so much, everybody, for following what we do. So much more to come. Trevor Rabin coming on the 18th. Many more interviews and shows. And yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Love this song.